The best way to improve your penetration testing skill is by growing your practical knowledge. There are few paid and free platforms like HackTheBox, TryHackMe and many more are available where you can test your hacking skills. Say hi to all of my viewers who are interested in ethical hacking and penetration testing. In this video, we are going to explore and penetrate the Metasploitable server, where we will find out the open ports and exploit the weaknesses. You can find all of the writes-up from my blog. Visit my blog and explore the contents below here. If there is any problem, then write me a comment on my comment section. Metasploitable is known as a test environment that possesses a secure place to perform penetration testing. Metasploitable server is available with 3 different versions, whereas Metasploitable 1 is useless. The 2 and 3 are mostly used by most newbies. This video is only to demonstrate the Metasploitable2 server. For this test environment, you need an instance, Kali, ParrotSec, or any, that can access a vulnerable target. Module 1. Setting up the lab environment. Welcome to the first step in your hacking journey. In this section, we will set up your lab environment. In particular, we will set up 2 virtual machines. One is Metasploitable virtual machine, the machine that you will hack, and the second one is Kali Linux virtual machine, the machine that contains the hacking tools. Since it is illegal to hack machines that you don't own, so we need to set up a virtual networking environment that we can hack. This is the figure that shows an overview of the networking environment, and how 2 virtual machines will create a connection to the virtual network, which is then connected to your actual network. Because these machines are behind the virtual switch, outsider attacks will not be able to get to the Metasploitable virtual machine. So, therefore it creates an isolated environment for you to hack in. Before proceeding further, you might have installed VirtualBox on your native system. If you have not yet installed, then install it now. Also, install the extension pack which can be found on VirtualBox's official site. Now download Kali Linux from their official site. From here click on Download, and download for virtual machine. Now click on Import and import the downloaded file. It will take time to complete the step. On completion, download the Metasploitable2 from the SourceForge. The installation step is quite easy. Now, it's time to extract the downloaded Metasploitable2 server that you have downloaded from SourceForge. There is a virtual machine disk machine image existing in this folder, so we have to create new VMs and import the VMDK images. Before you start the machine, you have to configure the Metasploitable machine network settings. it is most important for you to get a proper connection from the server without any error. Remember, Metasploit server network and the Kali Linux must be in the same network. Before that, you have to click on File and then click on Host Network Manager, Ctrl+H. If you have no host-only adapter listed, then click on Create and enable DHCP. It will automatically allocate you a stable IP address. Now, change the network adapter setting to a host-only adapter. Now start the VMs. Great. You are now successfully set up your lab environment. Let's discover the IP address of Metasploitable and scan for the open ports on our next module. Module 2. Discover the IP address and identify the weaknesses. The first step is to discover the machine that we want to connect to. Each machine is identified by a unique IP address. In this section, we will discover the IP address of the Metasploitable2 server using NetDiscover. NetDiscover is an active and passive ARP reconnaissance tool, initially developed to gain information about wireless networks without DHCP servers in war-driving scenarios. It can also be used on switched networks. Furthermore, it can be used to inspect your network's ARP traffic or find network addresses using the auto-scan mode, which will scan for common local networks. NetDiscover comes pre-installed with the Kali Linux operating system. Use the help command to find out much information about its usage. From the help command, I have to specify the interface name. Let me run the command and then execute it to discover the IP addresses that are connected with the interface. If you do not remember the interface name, then find out it by running the ifconfig command. As you can notice, we have received 3 IP addresses. Among them, one is IP is for a virtual router, and second one is the IP of host machine, and the third one is the target machine. Let's scan the network to check if there are any weaknesses. Now, the scan is completed, and we discovered the port information. You can find out a lot more about these protocols from Google. This is the task for you all. I hope you complete it by yourself. Module 3. Penetrate the FTP server. The way hackers gain access to machines is through vulnerabilities. You can think of these vulnerabilities as open doors to your system. Hackers leverage these open doors, vulnerabilities, to gain access to systems. The Metasploitable server has an FTP vulnerability, vsFTP 2.3.4. In this section of the lab, you will exploit this vulnerability to gain access to the server. The vulnerability that we are going to exploit in this lab is a malicious developer to an open-source Unix FTP server called vsFTP. The backdoor allowed the attacker to gain access to the terminal on the vulnerable machine. The attack was activated when the attacker logged into the username ending in semicolon bracket and an invalid password. Once the attack was activated, it opened a reverse shell on port 6200. I am going to show you 3 different ways to gain access. Let's find out how. Method 1. Manually exploit. Firstly, connect to the FTP server using Telnet. So, Open the terminal, type telnet, and specify the IP address and the port of the FTP server that is 21. This is a part of a vulnerability that was placed in the open-source FTP server by an unknown user. This user created this vulnerability by modifying the open-source code for the vsFTP server to include a check for smiley emoji in the username field. If a user included a semicolon bracket in the username, the backdoor was activated. So you might be wondering, what is a backdoor? A backdoor is a program that an attacker places on a machine that gives the hacker access to that machine's terminal. In the step above, the attacker is activating the backdoor. In the subsequent steps, the attacker connects to the backdoor running on port 6200 and issues a command to the terminal. Now that you activated the backdoor, you can now log in to get access to the terminal, get shell, by connecting to the backdoor that is running on 6200. Now, connect the backdoor using netcat. Notice that, when it executes the ID command in the terminal of the compromised machine, it returns the user and group names and numeric IDs of the current user or any other user on the server. Let me spawn a TTY shell. Let me check which Python language exists. Now run python-c, import pty.spawn, and then specify bin/bash inside the quotation. In this way, you can exploit the vsFTP 2.3.4 server. Method 2, with the help of the Metasploit framework. This method is quite easy. You just have to start the Metasploit framework and then run a few useful commands and you found the shell. Let's see the demo. Firstly, start Metasploit framework. Now search exploit for vsFTP. Now, run the use command to use the exploit to get interact with our target. Now run info to get the exploit information, needed parameters like remote hosts and remote ports, etc. Here it only needs to set the remote hosts. Once everything is set, input exploits command to execute the exploit. Unexpectedly, a session is created in the background. So run sessions command to check if is it true or not. Now run sessions-i and provide the session ID. As you can see, we got a shell. Similar to before, let's spawn a TTY shell. Method 3 is similar to the Metasploit framework, but the tool we are going to use is Armitage. There is a video on my YouTube channel that can help you in the usage of Armitage. If you have not yet watched that one, click the I button now. Module 4, enumerate the username and password. Username and password enumeration can be possible with brute forcing. Before that, we have to create a word list that can be helpful in terms of brute forcing. The tool we are going to use is CeWL. You can find out more info from my blog. Run CeWL and then specify the IP address, -w, and specify the output file name. On completion, you can check the word list from the existing directory using the ls command. You can read the word list using Nano Text Editor. Now we have a word list, let's try to brute forcing the username and password. Let's try to brute forcing the username and password. The tool we are going to use is Hydra. Hydra is a parallelized network login cracker built in various operating systems like Kali Linux, Parrot, and other major penetration testing environments. Hydra works by using different approaches to perform brute force attacks in order to guess the right username and password combination. You can find out more about its usage from this video. Click the I button to watch this video now. Run the help command to find out helpful commands for brute force attacks. Now run Hydra-L. Specify the word list that we have created before, -P. Specify the word list for password and then mention the URL. This will enumerate our username and password to get login access to the FTP server. Now we have couples of usernames with their passwords. Let's try to get a login with these credentials using the FTP client tool. Run FTP and then specify the IP address. Now input the username and then the password. As you can see, we have successfully got an FTP connection. Similar to FTP, you can also brute force the SSH, just you have to mention SSH instead of FTP. To get a login with SSH, just apply this command, where MSF admin is the username. Now input the password for the user MSF admin. As you can see, we have successfully enumerated the SSH server. Brute forcing can also be possible with the Metasploit framework. Let me explain with the help of an example. Open a terminal and start Metasploit database and also start the msf console. Firstly, search for the SSH login module. As you can see, two matching modules appear on my screen. Use the first one. Let me check for the useful parameter using the options command. From the output, we analyze that we have to set the hosts, the user file, the password file, and also we have to set stop on success. Let me set them all one by one. Now execute the run command to get SSH login access. You can find out the sessions using the sessions command. A brute force attack on the Metasploit console may take a huge amount of time. So I always prefer to practice the brute force attack with THC Hydra. Brute forcing can also be possible with Telnet and SMTP protocol. You can find out more about these from my blog. Module 5, PHP CGI Argument Injection using Metasploit Framework. From the Nmap scan result, we found that port 80 is running. That means it is an HTTP service running on port 80, signaling that this target might be hosting some explorable web content. To look at the contents ourselves, we can open a web browser of our choice and navigate to the target's IP address in the URL bar at the top of the window. This will automatically address the target's port 80 for the client-server communication and load the web page's contents. From the output, we observe that the running website shows us a few other pages that are accessible, and also a few are not listed on this website. At this place, directory busting, dir busting, comes to work. For this purpose, we will be using the tool called GoBuster, which is written in Go. In order to start our dir busting, we will need to discover what capabilities GoBuster has and which ones can assist us. By looking at the tool's help page, by typing in the GoBuster dir-h command in our terminal, we receive a list of all possible switches for the tool and their description. If you found this type of error, it means you have to install it.
In our case, we will only need to use the following: dir, to specify we are using the directory busting mode of the tool; -u, to specify the target's IP address; -w, to specify a word list, a collection of common directory names that are typically used for sites; -x, to file extensions to search for. Let's perform brute force the directories and files provided in the word list of our choice.
Now that we have received the result that we needed from GoBuster, that is phpinfo.php.
Navigating to the newly found link manually through our web browser can be done by inputting the phpinfo.php address in our URL search bar. Once we proceed with this, we are met with the installed PHP information page. After analyzing the PHP information page, I found the most important information that can help us to get a reverse connection.
After searching on Google with this keyword, I found that this can be exploitable with the help of Metasploitable framework.
Open a terminal and start the MSF Console. Gathering knowledge about the vulnerability, let's try to find the matching Metasploit module in order to exploit the vulnerability. We can see that we have found the matching exploit from the list of matching modules. Let us now try exploiting the vulnerability by loading the matching module in Metasploit. We need to set all the required parameters for the exploit module.
Set the R host. This is important to set the listening host parameter, as we have connected with the host-only adapter. You can find out the IP address using the ifconfig command.
We are now all set to exploit the vulnerable server. Let's issue the exploit command. Bingo! We got a interpreter connection. You can find out more information from this video, where you can observe the most useful post-exploitation command. Click the I button to watch it now.
Module 6. Exploiting Samba ports 139 and 445. From the Nmap scan, we have discovered two similar services, running NetBIOS SSN on ports 139 and 445. Let's see if we could exploit the Samba SMBD protocol.
Samba is a software package that gives network administrators flexibility and freedom in terms of setup, configuration, and choice of systems and equipment. The exploitation can be done with two methods. Let's figure it out with a proper explanation. SMB client is quite similar to FTP. It is a useful tool to test the connectivity of a Windows share. It can be used to transfer files or to look at share names. Run the help command to verify if the SMB client application was installed or not and also find out its usage. From the output, we have found that we have only mentioned -L and mentioned the target path address. If SMB client prompts you to input a password, just keep it blank and hit enter. As you can see, we have successfully got anonymous login. After investigation, I found a TMP that likes to be vulnerable. Let's try to get a reverse shell from the temp share.
Let's see if it be possible to get a reverse shell connection. Before that, we have to start a listener using Netcat on port 4444. The listener is started. Now, access the temp directory using this command. No password required, just hit enter.
There is a command called logon which can be used to execute a reverse shell script. Run help command to verify if login exists or not. Since the logon command is there, we can make a reverse connection using a bash script.
Here set the IP of the listening host. You can find it by running ifconfig command.
Once you execute the script, you can find out a reverse shell connection on the netcat listener.
As you see, we have successfully got the root shell of the Metasploitable server. Run this Python script to get the TTY shell.
Method 2. Using Metasploit framework. This is quite easy. Open a terminal and start the framework. Now search for exploit.
Use the 8th number module listed in this list, which is a user map module.
Now configure the parameter. Once everything is configured, run exploit to get the reverse connection.
As you can see, we have successfully managed to exploit the SMB Samba with the help of MSF Console. Module 7. Exploiting Java Remote Method Invocation to gain a root shell.
Java Remote Method Invocation, or Java RMI, is an object-oriented RPC mechanism that allows an object located in one Java virtual machine to call methods on an object located in another Java virtual machine. This enables developers to write distributed applications using an object-oriented paradigm. This exploitation is quite easy, only you have to start the Metasploit console and search for its vulnerability. From the output, we have found 2 suitable modules that can help us to gain access.
Let me simplify the list with an underscore line.
Let's try the auxiliary module first.
The auxiliary module is used in scanning, fuzzing, sniffing, and much more. Although these modules will not give you a shell, they are extremely valuable when conducting a penetration test. Here you need to set the remote hosts. Now execute the run command to validate if Java RMI exists or not.
Once I find out the proper information, let's use the exploit module.
This is helpful to check if their Java RMI is exploitable or not. The exploit module takes advantage of the vulnerability to provide access to the target system.
Notice that the payload is automatically set to interpret a reverse TCP. You find out a more suitable payload by running show payloads. I don't need to set the payload, so I skip this process and go for setting the parameters.
Here you have set the R hosts and L host parameters. Now execute the run command to get a interpreter session. Run shell command to get a root shell. Module 8. Gaining root shell from bind shell service. From nmap scan, we have discovered a new service on port 1524. This is simply a bash shell, which is bind to port 1524 TCP. It will run everything sent to that port on bash, and reply with the output. You don't need any tools like Metasploit framework for that. A simple netcat or telnet will do. At this place we are going to use the telnet service. It is easy to gain access to the Linux shell with the help of Telnet. Just open a terminal and type telnet, target IP, and specify the port. As you can see, you got a root shell. Module 9, exploiting a misconfigured NFS share. From the Nmap scan, we have observed that 111 TCP and 2049 TCP are in an open state. This means it may have weakly configured NFS share to gain access to a remote host, followed by the privilege escalation. NFS is a network file sharing protocol that allows users to share directories and files over the network across different operating systems. In addition, it will enable remote systems to be accessible locally when the shares are mounted. The accessibility of the NFS shares is based on whatever privileges are assigned to the share. Let's again examine the Metasploitable2 server with the help of the Nmap scripting engine. And specify the ports. We observe that on the port number 111, a directory is shown under NFS mount. Let's take a look on it and mount this share. The file system is usually owned by the root. If we are allowed to mount to the path, we will be able to read root files, and maybe write as well. Let's mount the share and see what type of privileges do we have. We will first start with creating a new directory locally on the MNT directory, and I'll call it a Metasploitable share for the sake of this demo. Now change the directory to MNT directory, and check if the directory was created or not. Now, mount the remote NFS share locally with the mount utility on Linux. Before that, make sure you have enabled the super user privileges using sudo su. Now run sudo mount-t nfs, specify the IP with share address. Now specify the path of the directory where you want to mount. On successful mount, you can list the directories and files on the Metasploitable share directory. Now change the directory to Metasploitable share, and then list all files and directories. Next, we will find out the .ssh directory which exists within the root directory. Change the directory to root. Our assumption was true. You can find out the .ssh file within the list. Let's change the directories to .ssh and list the files and directories. From the above, we have to find an authorized key. An authorized key in SSH is a public key used for granting login access to users. The authentication mechanism is called public key authentication. Authorized keys are configured separately for each user, usually in the .ssh/authorized keys file in the user's home directory. The approach here will be to create your own SSH keys and append the newly created public key into the authorized key of the victim user. Then log into the remote host with the victim user and owner password. To create an SSH key pair, we will use the SSH keygen command on our attacking machine. For this purpose, open a new terminal and enable super user privileges. Now change the directories to MNT. Now run this command to create a passphrase. Give a name for the key pair. We can keep the passphrase blank by simply hitting the Enter button on the keyboard. Once the command is completed, copy the public key file to mnt/metasploitable/root/.ssh. Now go back to the previous terminal and check if there is a public key exists or not. Now we are going to dump the public content to the authorized keys. You can check the content of authorized keys using the cat command. Now dump the public content to authorized keys using the cat command. Now you can read the content using the cat command. Now open a new terminal vertically and run sudo su command. Now from here change the directory to mnt and list all files and directories. As you can, we have an authorization key used to gain access to the server using the SSH client tool. Let's see how it works. Run SSH-I and then specify the authentication key. Now specify the username and then the IP address. Now we have gained the highest privileged of user access to the target machine. Module 10. Capture the VNC session. From the Nmap scan, we have discovered that a VNC service is running on port 5900. Virtual Network Computing, or VNC, allows you to remotely control a Linux computer with another computer through a graphical interface. You will be able to observe a Linux desktop environment and interact with it using the mouse and keyboard from a different computer. To establish a VNC session, we have to capture the VNC password using the brute force attack. So, let me fire up Metasploit framework. Now, search VNC 3.3 that we have observed from the Nmap scan. There is an auxiliary module available to brute forcing the VNC password. Use that module and show the options before configuring the module. From the options, we only need to set the hosts. No need to set the word list, as it is automatically configured. The auxiliary module execution succeeds, and we have found the password. Now run the VNC viewer command to start the VNC session. Now input the password. If the authentication is successful, you can find the GUI of the Metasploitable2 server. Module 11. Exploit Apache Tomcat Coyote JSP Engine 1.1. From the Nmap scan result, we found a port 8180 is running an HTTP service, signaling that this target might be hosting some explorable web content. To look at the contents ourselves, we can open a web browser of our choice and navigate to the target's IP address along with port ID in the URL bar at the top of the window. This will automatically address the target's port 8180 for the client-server communication and load the web page's contents. JSP stands for Java Server Pages. All this means is, web pages accessed through port 8180 will be assembled by a Java web application. We can see above that the Apache Tomcat default page is shown when we access the target machine IP through the browser. This is a default page, and it shows that Apache Tomcat is configured on the system. There are a lot of default functionalities that are used to configure Apache. I clicked on the Tomcat Manager option. It prompted for a username and password. A prompt appears on my screen that asks me to input the username and password details to gain access to the Tomcat Web Application Manager. Since the Apache default page was running, it might be a good idea to try logging in with Tomcat default username and passwords. You can find the default credential by searching on the web. The results can be seen in the highlighted area. From the search result, I have tried the username and password combinations, and I got success on the Tomcat combination. Scroll down to see if any upload option is available or not, and you can find an upload option, where you can deploy a WAR file. This is a good idea to take advantage of this to deploy a malicious WAR file to gain a reverse shell. A WAR file, Web Application Archive, is a file used to distribute a collection of JAR files, Java server pages, Java servlets, Java classes, XML files, tag libraries, static web pages, HTML and related files, and other resources that together constitute a web application. To craft a malicious WAR file, we will use the MSF Venom command line utility. Open a terminal and then search for available payload for the Java JSP engine. Now type msf venom-p and specify the payload. Set the listening host. If you don't know your IP, then check it using ifconfig command. Now set the listening port, -f and specify the file type, -o, and specify the file name. A WAR file of 1098 bytes is created, and you can find it from the home directory. Once everything is fine, then run a listing host with the help of Netcat. Port 4444 is starting to listen to the connections. Now go back to the browser and upload the file to Tomcat Web Application Manager. Once deploy is successful, you can locate the file from application path. Now, click on Hack to get a connection to port 4444. Now, you got a reverse shell connection on your Netcat. To take a stable TTY shell on the target machine, run the Python spawn script. Now export the term to xterm. From the ID command, you can see the user is Tomcat. Let's try to escalate the highest privilege. To escalate the privilege, we are going to use Nmap Interactive Vulnerability. Nmap is known as Network Mapper, is used in scanning for network and OS services detection. However, if misconfigured Linux terminal to be used with sudo or administrator privileges can lead to a privilege escalation. Let's run Nmap Interactive mode. Nmap interaction started. Now, input the sh command to gain root access. As you can see, the privilege escalation was successfully executed, and we got a root shell. This is the full video of the Metasploitable2 server. But we have not covered the DVWA, Mutility, WebDev, and Tiki Wiki web applications. We will explain them in a separate video. If you have any doubts or queries about this video, then write me a comment below the comment section.